Welcome back to The Mindful Haven, a podcast by Imperium Psychiatric Group, where healing, awareness, and hope take center stage. Today's conversation is a unique intersection of film and advocacy. We're joined by the extraordinary cast of the new film, Finding Nicole, a movie based on the true story of Nicole Beverly, a survivor, advocate, and clinical social worker whose journey is changing lives. Joining me today are the three key actors from the film: Katie Wallen, who portrays Nicole, Mari G, who plays Warren Beverly, and Blanca Blanco, who brings the life and the role of Catarina Lopez. And together we'll explore how storytelling can drive awareness about domestic violence, the emotional weight of these performances, and how films can become a vehicle for healing. So let's dive right in. Katie, so portraying Nicole Beverly is no small task. What was your first reaction to hearing her story, and how did you prepare yourself emotionally and mentally for this role?
Well, this role is very heavy. When I was, preparing, it was difficult because I didn't come from this, and I had to kind of create my own environment to be able to have a good perspective of what I was going to deal with. And when I was talked to about the role, I was honestly terrified because it was so much, and it's not a body experience going through this, and it's a roller coaster. You're so up and down. So it was really having to process all of it, educate myself heavily on the subject, and be able to come full circle before we even start filming, because none of it was in order. So I had to know where I was coming from. So it was difficult, but very much rewarding.
I could imagine. I watched the film and it was great. And there were some scenes that were definitely even tough to watch. So I could only imagine having to mentally prepare to take that on in front of a screen. And Mari, stepping into the shoes of Warren Beverly meant portraying someone responsible for real life trauma. What was your approach to navigating such a sensitive and complex character?
Well, the first thing I did was I talked to Nicole Beverly, because it's not like it's a character we're coming up with. Like, this is a real person. And this was the first time he actually playing somebody who's actually, real. So I talked to her to find out more about what was the background for her. How did they grow up? How did they meet? Just all the ins and outs of all the intimate details, so I can truly understand not only her point of view to make sure I portray certain things correctly, but also at the same time to understand clearly what some of his motivations may be and why he made some of the choices that he made. So that was a big piece of that. And then the second piece of it too is being able to, kind of embody some of those things, where asking myself the question of, what happens when you allow your demons to override the love that you have? Because I do believe he truly did love them, but he didn't deal with his issues. He had a lot of issues from, what Nicole described to me. So it made sense of why, he started acting the way that he did. So I think the problem with, today's society is that, men, we have a certain stigma in sharing the things that we perceive to be weak or soft, dealing with certain sensitive issues of how we grow up. And I think he was a product of that, of not expressing himself and going to get, help and dealing with his dysfunctions in a proper and healthy way. So like a dam, too much water building up, at some point, something's going to break. And that's what it was. And because he didn't do what needed to be done, you saw the results in the film and some of the issues that came about that. So you're looking at high levels of dysfunction. And the main thing was trying to display that in an authentic way. Me and Katie, we worked together a few times before, so we had a great relationship to be able to pull that out. And I think that was the main thing. So hopefully, we did the job to play both sides of that coin.
Now, that's interesting. I didn't know that you had worked together previously, but there was such a good chemistry on the film. And even with it being such a difficult thing to really portray and show, because there was so much abuse, having that dynamic, I'm sure was helpful to some degree. Yeah. And there were some scenes that were, like I said, pretty hard to watch, but you definitely, I feel like, portrayed that character very well. Absolutely. And Blanca, I know your character plays an important role in Nicole's journey as well. So what drew you to the story particularly, and what were some of the most impactful moments for you during filming?
Yeah, so I watched Nicole Beverly on a CNN show and a few years ago, and her story and her bravery really inspired me. Like I'm like I want to meet this lady. Like she was I seen so many cases because I study psychology as well and forensic and stuff and to be able to look at this she really stood out because she didn't want her identity to be compromised, that instead she decided to face what she was dealing with and make it national and bring awareness to it. And that I just thought that was very powerful. And so when I was approached about this character, I was very happy because I just thought we need more stories of mental health, and I love working with this production. They really like they become like a family, and they put so much into it that I knew that they were going to make justice to the story. And also I thought it really offered a very unique perspective of how a counselor or a therapist or a support group is really important in the healing process of someone. And I feel that there were so many key moments because during the set, it was an emotional roller coaster for all of us. We all like took everything in. We actually went through changes like a family, and I feel that that really made the family like feel like, oh God, we're going through so many ups and downs. And I thought that the perspective of the counselor, how important it was in the healing process, and also in encouraging and motivating Nicole, that she is strong, that she can move forward, that she can break the cycle of abuse. And I feel like I like that perspective in the script. I thought we need more of that kind of stories, where you have that perspective, because a lot of times it's not really looked. People just assume that it's like, they stick on. They have so many layers in this story that made it so real, which is real, but it's like really like it captured the realness of it, of mental health and the ups and downs and just I just love when Nicole realized that in the scene that, oh yeah, like I can do this, and it empower her. And you see how much, she was holding back and she was able to move forward. And that was exciting to see because you don't see a lot of, cases like that, in real life sometimes. People don't get the chance and I feel like she worked so hard to make this, happen, to make her, to get out of her, breaking the cycle of abuse. The character. I mean, the Nicole and also, the actors were incredible.
Absolutely. Having the chance to have met her and hosted a podcast with her and then seeing the movie as well. She is so strong in what she went through and also so bold. And I just admire her so much because being a survivor of domestic abuse is such a challenge and something to be proud of regardless if you're able to overcome that. But being able to take that and channel it into a book and a movie and being strong enough with that voice is so inspiring and admirable. And this podcast is by Imperium Psychiatric Group, where we often talk about holistic healing and mental health recovery. Katie, how do you see a film like this contributing to those conversations, especially for survivors who haven't yet spoken up?
The biggest thing that I get from this and talking about like the mental health and all of this is the perspective that it comes from. It really makes people think twice about judging victims because you fall for Warren and you go through this journey and you're like, oh my gosh, I see, like you almost can understand a little bit more and be less judgmental for the people who are stuck in these situations because, being on the inside is different than being on the outside. And people are so easy to just say, oh, you can just leave. It's like, no, it's not that simple. you know? So I think that's a key thing that I really picked up. And, you know, talking about mental health, I mean, the beatdown that victims get before they actually are physically abused with, you know, mental abuse and saying things to put them down and making them feel less human. And these things, I mean, we all have insecurities. And if you are with somebody who's feeding into these insecurities, I mean, you should consider that being a red flag, but it's just those things that we don't really understand unless we're in it. And I feel like this film brings that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it's so easy to just judge a situation from the outside and wonder, how can they stay? Why don't they get up and leave? How can you tolerate that? But when you realize that from a mental health standpoint, or unfortunately, if you're ever in that position, it's so much more than that. There's so many layers. There's so much complexity. There's so much that goes into it. And it's just fascinating the more you learn about it. And I feel like you build so much empathy as well and understanding for that. And I'm really thankful just that this movie can bring that to so many people. And until you're in that situation or know someone in that situation, you just won't understand. So I think that this is so crucial to really shed a light on that and really be a source of education for so many people out there, whether they're in it and they're seeking help or just learning about it from a new perspective, essentially.
Right.
And Blanca, we learned that you have a bachelor's and a master's degree with honors in psychology and social work. So what deeper message do you believe that this film sends about the complexity of healing from trauma?
I feel that this film shows that trauma is complex and that also it is a process, but it's not linear. Like you have ups and downs, and I think it's good for the audience to see that, because then you see a movie, oh, girl, is everything wonderful? But no, it's like you went through so many ups and downs, and that's a normal, it's a complicated process. So I think that this film brings that message, and also it really like shows how survivors are strong and they're not victims. I know that Nicole, from the beginning, she wanted to show that she was not a victim, but she was a survivor, and she wanted to make sure that that was kept in the script. And I just feel that that happens with a lot of survivors. They when they're dealing with trauma, they want to feel empowered by knowing that they're not victims. They're surviving. They have strength and they're moving forward. And when you put it in a victim perspective, it just like takes some of their credit, like it's like, oh, you're a victim. No, you're a survivor. And I feel that this film really focused on that. It was empowering. Like I was getting goosebumps every time I watched the film, and it definitely raises awareness and inspires hope. I think that we don't have a lot of films about mental health. People don't talk about it. It's very rare. And especially, with all the stigma, which I know we're going to talk about that in the next few questions, but, I think that it is a film that will really, normalize. Let's talk about this. Let's have this conversation.
Yes.
Absolutely. Especially that it is based on a true story. I think there's some movies that shed a little bit of light on domestic abuse, but not in this way where
Not
it's
as deep. Yeah. It's like
not as
very
deep.
clean. Like they want to keep it surface, but this was really like the reality. That's why I say it really like it shows that complexity of abuse, because the subtle movements that you see in the movie, like with I spoke with both actors. They did an incredible work. Like I would see them winning an Oscar with this performance. Seriously, like I'm just very like I don't really say that much that compliment as much, but I really like feel that they did their work. They did their homework, because the subtle moments that you see in the movie, there was a lot of going on inside. A lot of it that I would see when I was working as a therapist, that when it's not overly dramatic. And it's like subtle moments that were very powerful and had a lot of meaning in the movie.
Absolutely. And speaking a little bit about basically the complexities and looking at things with a different perspective, Mari, after working on this film, has your perspective on domestic violence or even masculinity in our culture shifted in any way?
Yeah, I think that 2 points with that. Number one, when it comes to just the film itself, I think it brought more awareness, because I didn't realize how common this was until people who watched it that I know even personally sat down and talked to me and told me about some of the things they went through. I had a family member last weekend watched it, and then she told me about a particular part that triggered her and had something similar, some of the actions in the film portrayed to her by her ex-husband. And I had no idea. Like, she'd been carrying this for years, and we're very close. And it was interesting how she told me that, she's like, I tell you everything, but I pretty much never really told anybody that. So my point is, I'm glad that this film at least making it more common, at least to talk about it, because now it opens up my heart for a new level of empathy, because I love her. And I didn't know that's something she went through. And then hopefully building a community to help protect those, at least it's family, if nothing else, for those of us who find out that somebody close to us has gone through these things. But so as bad as what the things that the film displays, I'm glad that we did our job to show different points of what people dealt with. And it was one particular point. It wasn't even like the whole thing. So it was interesting that certain points that we put in the film, everybody has a different experience, but it's all tied together. So, I was grateful for that. And I think the second piece about the masculinity aspect is that, it's no secret that today's world that we have a lot of, political and social agendas that's going on, a lot of buzz terms that's thrown around. And I think the issue with, masculinity now is that idea of it isn't really understood. So you hear terms like toxic masculinity, which really there's no such thing, because you never heard the term toxic femininity, because that'd be stupid. That doesn't even make any sense. The problem is that we live in a world where the idea of masculinity and high levels of mental dysfunction are being merged as two. Those are two different things. And an example of that would be how if you had, we know that a firearm is designed to cause bodily harm, but if you put it in the arms of a murdering maniac, then that's going to be bad for business for everybody. But if you take that same firearm, similar to the film, and you put it in the hands of a cop who has integrity, who has wisdom, who can exercise restraint, who knows when to use it, but not looking for a reason to, because he's there to protect. He's there to provide service and also maintain peace and order. Two different things. They both have the power to do something, but it's about the intention. The firearm takes on the intention of the individual. Well, I would say similarly, that's the same situation when it comes to masculinity. And I can say this for myself because I'm a full-time father, a single father at that. And I love my daughter with my soul. My DNA, my derivable nucleic acids love my baby. And I've been there ever since. And I've had to fight to protect and care for her in a lot of different ways to make sure that she has a chance to have a life that's worth living. So that's the example of masculine, that protecting, providing, securing, being a leader, being responsible for all your actions, dealing with your issues. So I hope that if nothing else, the conversation starts where we start really looking at everything and start rolling back all the different situations that come into how these things get started. And if nothing else, I hope that, the display of Warren's evil shows what it's like when somebody has the power or masculine traits, but still be dysfunctional. Because you could be feminine and still be dysfunctional. That mental health aspect. How do we deal with our issues, since every single person has a story to tell? Everybody's been through something bad in their life in some way, somewhere in their childhood that's been unfair. But how do we move past that? How do we say the buck stops here so we can make sure that we don't bleed on other people, that we don't become the thing that we despise most, the thing that we hate most? And I see that a lot. And Warren is an example of somebody who did not do what he was supposed to do, which is use his power to protect his family, to even protect himself by making sure he's correct. He let that overcome him to feel empowered and being controlling and doing all these wicked things. So I think that's the main thing. It's like painting correct pictures of knowing what we're seeing so we can be able to have the correct understanding to have the proper solutions.
Absolutely. And two things that you said just like really stuck out in terms of everyone has a story and everyone, it's their own responsibility in a way to figure that out for themselves in terms of not bleeding into others. And going back to one of your earlier points about how not everyone has a story, but also going back to what you said about how it brings that conversation to the table, essentially. So it's something that is shunned and people don't feel comfortable talking about. But once this is out in the open, people tend to realize how common it actually is at some level or some degree, where they've been through some kind of struggle with a spouse and some level of abuse or domestic violence. And it really opens that up where people are now talking about that and being able to build that community and being able to grow within themselves to fix and heal and really find that network and realize that they're not alone and realize that they're not one of a few, they're one of a lot. It's a lot more common than anyone really knows until a conversation like this does come up. So I think that was a great point that I just wanted to touch on. And I know we are focused on creating a safe space for anyone looking for help here at Imperium. And we know finding Nicole is just one story among millions. And Katie, what advice would you give to survivors watching the film who may not have shared their stories yet?
Oh boy, it's intense. So I would say before you watch the movie, have tissues next to you. And it is triggering. It's triggering and it exposes things that it's like the guy with the flashlight clearing out the cobwebs. I mean, we're talking in the crevices of your darkest closets that it's being exposed. And I think the biggest thing is to know that you're not alone and that there is hope. I think, like you guys have all been saying, we haven't been able to have these conversations. So let's start stepping up and trying to have these conversations. Reach out to someone that you feel you can trust to share how you feel and process. Get a therapist. I mean, there's avenues and finding help is hard. It's scary getting yourself out of these situations, but there are people there waiting to help you. They're there. You just have to let them know you need your help.
Absolutely. And it's something that's certainly scary and uncomfortable to do. And that's why I think this movie is bringing such awareness that is so helpful to so many people. It's a wonderful thing that it's out there, it's being watched, it's being talked about, because the amount of people that will be helped by this is countless. So it's great that, even I feel lucky to even be a part of this conversation, because I just know that it is definitely going to help people and bring so much awareness. And I have a question for both Blanca and Mari. So at Imperium, we often see how shame and fear keep people from really seeking help that they need. So how do you hope that this film chips away at that stigma? If Blanca, you want to...
Yeah. So people often feel, ashamed or guilty when it comes to seeking help. And it's a lot of times because they're afraid of being judged, or they feel they can do it on their own, or they just don't want to appear weak, feeling like a fear that they might appear weak. But I think that this film really portrays a character that has major mental health struggles and seeks help, and it normalizes that experience. And I feel that people that are watching that, they're going to be able to see like, oh, okay, I'm having this issue. It's okay to ask for help. And I feel that the more that they showed a lot of empathy and understanding in this film when it came to Nicole, her whole journey. And that's so important with like it reduces judgment, and it really addresses stigma, because it just becomes like, okay, like this is what we gotta do. This is the next step. It's a normal part of, it's just, you just have to keep moving you forward. So I feel like this one provides education, and also, it shows the challenges of, what that experience brings, but also just the support, and that is, you're a strong person. When you ask for help, doesn't mean that you're a weak person. And I know that with abuse, it's, people want to keep them to themselves. They don't want to involve other people, because in for example, Nicole, in situations like she would, like in the beginning, there were so many small incidents that where it's kind of like, oh, it was like, oh, like, so many red flags in the beginning, but they're very small that it's kind of hard to see. Like when you're like, once you're in it, and then you start, once you start controlling you, separating you from your family, your friends, and they're taking control, then that's like the moment where I feel that the film comes in handy for people that are watching and be like, oh, I experienced that. It's a lot of red flags that were there. And I just feel that it is a sensitive topic that it will have spark conversations. And I feel that's a very good thing about a film, but especially based on mental health struggles and abuse.
Absolutely.
Well, I think a few things. I think the main thing is I hope that, well, because here's the thing, like we just talked about, and we all agreed, if we all have been through some traumatic stuff in our life in one way or another. And when you look at a lot of situations that people get into, it typically stems from behaviors formed in their childhood experiences. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't deal with their childhood trauma. They grow up and they get into escapism and all these different things like that. And then we quote unquote bleed on other people with some of the issues that you see in the film. So with that in mind, I'm hoping that it at least opens up to, because let's be honest, we can't be open to everybody because everybody doesn't have our best interests at hand. And I hope that it makes somebody want to connect with somebody that they can trust to start talking about these things, who does have their best interests at hand. And if nothing else, maybe your company will be able to provide the opportunity for people, at least from a professional commercial level, who's dedicated to helping people work through the issues so they can be a productive person in society. So I think that's the main thing. And then the other piece of that is like everybody else spoke about here, is just mainly just conversation starter. And that's the power of film. As us as actors, we're painting a picture and telling a story. And I think that's the beautiful thing about, this type of film is that, there's still an art behind all of these different things because it's a story of hope and overcoming a main obstacle. We see Nicole as the hero overcoming a very traumatic obstacle for herself and for her children's sake. And she was able to actually do that. So I'm hoping that not only just from people who've been victimized, but also maybe stop people from even getting to that place. An example of that is that when we were at the Los Angeles premiere, Nicole mentioned how in one of the schools, because she does social work, that one of the boys, because she talks about all the different traits and different things that can kind of lead into that, she said how a boy came up to her and said, I appreciate you talking about these things because I see some of those traits in me and I don't want to be that type of man. How beautiful was that for a child per se to identify those things, because she has taken it upon herself to turn her pain into power, to be able to start teaching people and then hopefully stop these things from happening in the first place. So there won't be any victims. The victim doesn't become the victimizer, because that's typically the scenario. And the cycle goes on and on. So I'm hoping that we can continue to talk in those ways, raise social awareness, like with this podcast, which your company does. And any way we can, just by not only being actors, but being advocates for the message and why we decided to take part in this film.
And Nicole did mention that when I spoke to her as well about the child at the school and how he had that experience with her and realized that he was noticing some of those traits in himself. And I was like, wow, that is so powerful and so important that she is doing that at schools when kids or young adolescents are learning about this or haven't learned about it yet, and are getting that experience and that knowledge young, where they're growing up and they're forming themselves to have that experience and that education to self-reflect. And that's very powerful to have such self-awareness as a adolescent. But that was something that definitely stood out to me from my conversation with her as well. So it's just super important all around. And she's doing such incredible work beyond even the movie. So she's amazing. And this movie's been amazing. Her work is great. And I just want to thank you so much, Katie, Mari, Blanca, for bringing Nicole's story to life with such heart, integrity, and purpose. And at Imperium Psychiatric Group, we believe that stories like this, raw, real, and courageous, can truly change lives. Finding Nicole is more than a film. It's a call to awareness, a tribute to survivors, and a reminder that healing is always possible.
Yes.
And to our listeners, if you or someone that you love or anyone that you know is experiencing abuse, please know that help exists. It's out there. There's so much help available. You deserve to feel safe, seen, and supported, and you are never alone. So thank you so much for having this conversation and being part of the Mindful Haven podcast. And from Imperium Psychiatric Group, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for having us.